We now return to engineering disasters on Modern Marvels. On March 27, 1981, the 5-story Harbor Cay condominium in Cocoa Beach, Florida, collapsed while it was still under construction.
It literally pancakes.
The disastrous accident killed 11 people and injured 23 others.
What you see is columns sticking out, sticking up, and the slabs came down, stripping themselves around the columns.
The design of the beach condominium was a simple scheme that was often used in office and residential construction.
Reinforced concrete columns, flat concrete slabs between those columns, rectangular shape. You construct floor after floor.
Because the accident took place while the building was under construction, it came under the jurisdiction of the federal government's Occupational Safety and Health Administration. OSHA immediately brought in investigators from the National Institute of Standards and Technology to determine what caused the disaster at the Cocoa Beach site.
Investigating a failure is very much like investigating a crime. You have to sift through a lot of evidence.
Their initial on-site inspection gave the investigators a general idea of what might have happened.
When we looked at the evidence, we saw that a lot of the columns remained vertical, and this told us that the floor slab had separated from the columns in what we call a punching shear failure.
A punching shear failure happens when the concrete floor slab cracks and breaks away from its column connection.
It's as though you're poking the column through the floor slab like a pencil through a piece of paper. The resistance to that penetration is a function of the strength of the concrete in the slab. And it's also a function of the thickness of the slab and where the reinforcing steel is placed in the slab.
When they analyzed the concrete used in the construction at Harbor Cay, the investigators discovered that the steel reinforcing bars in the 5th floor slab were placed incorrectly.
The location of the rebar in the concrete is important. Sometimes you need the rebar right under the top surface of the slab. Sometimes you need it near the bottom surface of the slab.
Before the concrete was poured, the pieces of rebar were set on steel chairs to hold them in position. But in this case, the chairs were too short. The rebar should have been closer to the top of the slab to give it enough depth and strength to resist the pressure of the column.
Near the column, the tension forces are near the top of the slab. Therefore, you want the reinforcing bars as close to the top surface as possible.
It was actually 1 inch deeper in the floor slab than it should have been. As a result of this reduced height, it reduced the resistance of the floor slab to this punching shear failure.
You could have been a mistake by the people who supplied the material, or somebody picked up the wrong pieces and put it on the truck and delivered. We don't know. But once we have determined that from measuring the height on the 5th floor, that was the time we said, aha, we think we know something.
Construction workers noticed cracks near the columns on several floors. They notified the engineering designer, who came to the site on March 10, 1981, just 1 week before the collapse.
The designer came, looked at it, and concluded everything is hunky-dory.
In fact, what those cracks were telling us is that there was a distress at the connection between the slab and the column.
"14 years after the Harbor Cay disaster, on June 29, 1995, the Sampoong department store in Seoul, South Korea collapsed. The disaster occurred during peak shopping hours. 502 people were killed, and more than 900 others suffered from grave injuries. The entire city of Seoul was in shock. Similarities to the Cocoa Beach collapse in 1981 were numerous.
Again, flat slabs, reinforced concrete columns, most likely shear punch.
The store was built in 1989, and that same year, the owners decided to add another floor to the 4-story building.
The engineer of record said, that cannot be done. We are dealing with a structure which was designed over a landfill, and we should not add this weight. The owner hired another company which said, yes, sir, we are going to do it.
The 5th floor was built, and the building stood for 5 years. The collapse was triggered when 10 tons of air conditioning units were added to the roof in 1995.
And that created stresses on the top of the structure, which was already overstressed.
Like the Harbor K structure, cracks in the concrete were brought to the Sampoong store owner's attention just days before the collapse. But they ignored the warning signs and refused to evacuate the shoppers and store personnel, a decision that resulted in the high number of deaths and injuries. Though they were in different parts of the world and collapsed 14 years apart, the Harbor K and Sampoong disasters were both the result of a punching shear failure that could have been prevented. In Korea, the store owners, Jun Lee and his son Han Song Lee, were both found guilty of negligence and bribery and sentenced to prison for 7 to 10 years. The state of Florida strengthened its construction safety laws after the disaster in 1981. Requiring more scrutiny of construction plans and more on-site inspections by engineers. 1 cubic yard of concrete weighs over 1.5 tons, but requires only 50 pounds of steel to reinforce it as flooring.